Okay, you're not live.
All right, thank you. And it's 3:30, so I'll call the Executive Committee of the Dunn County Board of Supervisors to order Wednesday, June 9th, 2021. And let the roll show everyone's here, but Tom Quinn, I believe. That's correct. All right, approval of the minutes. I so move. Supervisor Steen moves, Supervisor Morehouse seconds. Any discussion on the minutes as printed? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Public comments. Krista, do we have any?
No public comments. Nope.
Do we have any public comment from anybody? We let. Do you have something to say now, Bob, or are you here just to, if we ask you to?
I think that's what I thought I was on. Like 5 to 6.
Right. Okay.
Certainly want to come up with that time. Anytime you guys want.
All right. Let's see. Down to staff reports. County manager then.
Thank you. The first item that we have is the draft agenda for the June 16th, 2021 meeting of the Dunn County Board. It's in your packet. Going over some of those highlights, you see we have some retirements, long-time county employees to acknowledge. Sue Moore, in particular, 39 years. Stepped down this month. We will be meeting in person at the county board. It will remain an option for anybody any supervisor or anybody else who's supposed to attend to do so by video, by teleconference. Just as we're doing this meeting, it will be hybrid. It will be broadcast on our YouTube channel. But we will be meeting in person. So please, if you are going to be in person, bring your county laptop. Just as we're doing here, we want people with laptops serve as a camera so that people who are watching online can see who it is. You can see even in this small gathering, one of our screens is from that camera over near Matt. And if we only have that, you can't even, except for me waving my arm, you can't even tell that I'm talking. So the need for the laptop so that people can see who's talking is fairly important. When it comes to the reports that I'll give, I had left in COVID-19 update. I think I will give one more update, at least on COVID-19. If for no other reason than to highlight that we're barely crawling our way toward 35% of the population being vaccinated. And it just doesn't seem to be going beyond that, which is disappointing. One thing I do not have on here that I think I want to report on is the American Rescue Plan Act funds the county has received. Several people have inquired about them. There have been several ideas that have been floated about the potential use of those funds. And the CFO and I, of course, are very much aware of this. We have received half of the money that was earmarked for us already, $4.4 million. We have moved it into an interest-bearing account while we wait for better clarification as to what we can use it for. So far, the only things that have been identified are water and sanitary sewer systems, which we don't operate in Dunn County, broadband, which we talked about, but which we know there's also additional funds from the federal government and state. And then there is talk about income or revenue loss recovery pursuant to some formulas that may yield some money if we apply it here in Dunn County, but not as much as you would think. A lot of people, I think, anticipate that we were down quite significantly in sales tax during the COVID year. It was not the case. We were actually up. So there may be other elements of revenue that we could use some of those ARPA funds. But the biggest part of the message that we're receiving from the experts is don't rush. Some of other jurisdictions have received their money and have already spent some of it or even a large parts of it. But those are the ones that I've talked to are for COVID related expenses that are quite clear. For instance, putting in HIPAA filters into their air systems and things of that nature. What we're waiting on is greater clarification from the U.S. Treasury as filtered down through the state as to what we can use it for. And we have an example of this with the Recovery Act earlier this year, where at first it was very unclear, but we gave it time and slowly they not only clarified what those monies could be used for, but broadened the range of what they could be used for. So in terms of setting ourselves up for the best possible uses of this ARPA money, it makes sense to wait. We're not under the gun. Nobody is saying you must use the funds in 60 days or 90 days or even a year. There's no such deadline. So it makes a great deal of sense to wait, figure out what our full range of options are, and then make an informed decision. So that will be what I'll be reporting to the county board as far as the ARPA funds. By the way, since I have broached that, are there any questions from anybody regarding it?
Supervisor Steen?
Yeah, there's no time limit on spending it, but if you don't spend it, does it go back?
I suspect it'll be clawed back. By the way, I'm glad you mentioned that, Supervisor Steen. I've actually already received a call from one of the townships saying, hey, if we can't figure out a use for this, can we donate it to the county? Which is what happened again with the recovery funds. We actually got quite a bit of funds and we had good use for that. We don't know that part either, but you can anticipate, given history of these kinds of things, if you don't use it by the deadline, and I think, what is the deadline?
Your commitment deadline is 12/31/2024,
There you go.
and I believe it's like a 12 or 18 months run out after that to actually get the money spent. And there will be a whole host of reporting and so on that goes along with that.
Did you say 24, Keith?
Correct.
Would we be well served by trying to take a good look at where we want to spend it so that we can spend it?
Absolutely. That's what staff is recommending is first thing we need to know is where we can spend it.
Right.
Because we can waste a lot of time talking about how we would like to spend it, only to be found out that's not an option. First, we need to find out where we can spend it. And then, yes, absolutely, we want to take the time to talk about what's the best way to do so. What's the best places to spend it. One thing, for instance, there are some that are fairly obvious. It's advised against putting it into operations, salaries and benefits, and ongoing costs, because this isn't ongoing money. This is one-time money, $8.8 million for Dunn County, but it's one-time money. You don't want to use it to set up something new that is going to have ongoing costs, maintenance or salaries and benefits, et cetera, because this money won't be there after it's spent. But we absolutely want to talk about, once we understand where it can be used, what would be the best place for it. And that will ultimately come from the county board. That will be, I think, a decision at the very least here at executive committee. We haven't even talked through the process of allocating it yet, but because it's premature. But at the very least, it'll come to this executive committee. It won't be staff making this decision.
I guess I got one other question down there. If it would be such a thing as a one-time thing to alleviate a problem, wouldn't that be a wise use of it?
Depends on the nature of the problem. Is it a problem that's going to come back up once the money's, plugged a hole? Is the hole going to reopen? It depends on the nature of the problem.
Well, I'm just thinking if you've got a problem this year, you can solve it, even though it's not recurring money. Might make good
But is
sense
it a
to solve.
recurring problem, I guess is my question.
Well, yeah, but if you've got problems fixing your budget this year,
Yeah.
and you have a chance to fix it, wouldn't that be a wise use of the money?
Well, absolutely. For instance, if we were able to do a wish list, my own personal preference is, we know we have $42 million in capital improvements. We also know that earlier this year, the county board approved a capital improvement plan that features borrowing $3 million a year, which adds to our debt, but also allows us to slowly work down our total debt over time. Maybe this money could be used to not make that borrow for 1 year or 2 years, so that the rate at which we're able to work down that debt, because we didn't have to borrow for it because we used these funds, is steeper. We're able to work down that debt faster. That seems to me to be a wise use of the funds. Now, that's just one person's opinion. But we'll have to talk through the various options once we have clarity on how to spend it. Are there any other questions on ARPA?
Didn't look like it.
Okay, moving on. Getting back to the agenda for the June 16th meeting. We'll get reports from Highway Operations, Public Health, and UW Extension, Madison Extension. Now, as you know, through COVID, we have not been having these reports presented orally to the county board. My recommendation is that we continue that way. I think it has worked well. The people who pull those together have been in attendance at the meeting remotely and available to answer any questions. We have John Swirsky, KT Gallagher, and Catherine Emanuel have all submitted and will be at the meeting virtually, if not in person. So I just think in terms of the flow of our meeting, county board, the efficiency of our meeting, the timeliness, the good use of our time, my recommendation is that we will continue that way. The reports are there. Supervisors have an opportunity almost a full week in advance to read them, prepare any questions that they have, and can raise those questions at the meeting if they have them. Otherwise, we can move on to business. But obviously, it's your decision as the executive committee how you would like that to run.
Mr. Chairman, I'm
Yes.
just going to pass along a suggestion from one of our departments in Health and Human Services who asked if it would be possible to have a 1 or 2 minute elevator speech to accompany an annual report. I said I would pass it along.
Supervisor Steen, you were going to mention something?
Well, while the overall concept is all right, I guess I would think that perhaps quarterly, at the very least, that the committees would make an appearance in person before the board. I think that,
Committees or departments?
well, what were you just talking?
We're
These are
talking about
department, annual department
Yeah, the
reports.
departments, at least quarterly, have them make a show up.
Well, they only do it once a year now.
Okay, well then,
So what you're saying is you'd like them to be here in person once a year?
yeah.
Okay.
I think that fosters familiarity for one thing, who you're talking with and about. And I think it's a good opportunity for them to interact with the board and vice versa. Put a human face on whoever you're dealing with. That's just my thought. The Zoom thing, I think from a management's point of view is good because it limits the discussion. It makes the meetings go quicker. But from a people perspective, for my 2 cents, I'd rather meet in person, meet with the people. Maybe it's old fashioned, just the way I like to do it. But if I was a manager, yes, I would like to curtail all discussion. Bam, 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 get through there and get done. I get it. But I offer my 2 cents.
So anybody else want to weigh in on this discussion?
Mr. Chair.
Oh, yes. Go ahead, Supervisor Tripp.
Thank you. In judiciary and law, what I've been doing the last couple of months is we accept the written reports from each department, and when they come up at the meeting, I ask if there are questions or if the manager has anything to add. I think it's about 50-50. They will say nothing to add, no questions, fine, we're done. Or occasionally something will have come up or they would like to elaborate on something personally that maybe doesn't come across well in writing. If we gave department managers that option, and there's always an option for supervisor questions, I think that satisfies the need for that communication, and it also satisfies the efficacy with which we get through the reports.
Supervisor McCall.
I was going to suggest something similar to what Jim has apparently been doing already. So good on that. But if, I mean, if the goal is for the supervisors, with your point, to have a personal face for the people in those departments, and you want to do that, I don't know, once a year, I don't know that the report actually does that. I mean, if you really want to do that, it might behoove us to say, offer a window before the meeting to sit down and say hi, a more social than a report. I don't know that that needs to be part of the meeting, and I don't know that a report really achieves that.
I think, anybody else? I think over the past few years, thinking back, when we did have reports and we had, like in this case, we'd have John and KT and Catherine here, that they mingled before the meeting, at break time, and after the meeting, and we did get to know people a little bit that way, along with them giving the reports. I think we've kind of done that a little bit. What Supervisor Tripp mentioned is I have asked if there was anything they'd like to add at times. We probably haven't remembered to do that every time, but asked if there was any questions or if there was anything they wanted to add or talk about. It's kind of a, I know everybody has a different opinion. How about we go thumbs up if you'd like to have them give the report in person and like they used to, or otherwise we'll do it more like Mr. Tripp suggested. Good. So thumbs up if you'd like to do it the way we used to do it.
With a time limit.
What's the time? We have 4,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
5. Yeah.
Could I modify that a little?
Well, you're
halfway
Yeah.
you're gonna make it right in the middle here.
Expand a little on what Jim said. I'm wondering if, for instance, you have, in this case, 3 people. Could we say, we have 3 reports tonight versus Highway Department, and then the Highway Department, manager would in fact introduce themselves, and then you or them, whatever you feel is more, appropriate, would say, are there any questions for this about their report?
Okay.
They're visible for that short amount of time, and people can see who is.
So you're suggesting they come up to the podium?
Right, but
yeah.
not present their own
Right.
report. Now, I don't know if that fits anybody else's.
I think that would be a nice addition to what Supervisor Tripp, suggested. And then, like in this case of KT wanting to talk for a couple of minutes to explain something or whatever, that would be a perfect opportunity for her to do that. But we wouldn't get the, some of those reports thinking back would get to be 10, 15 minutes long.
And then some.
And then some. I remember one time it was close to an hour, the three reports that we got went. And, they almost went over the report word for word and we can all read, so I like your idea. I like Jim's idea. So is it okay if we try that?
So let me see if I may, Mr. Chair, if I can capture this. What we'll try for those scheduled annual reports, have the manager here in person,
Right.
introduce themselves. If they have anything that they want to highlight, 2 or 3 minutes, I'll install a trap door and a lever that I can use to control that.
That's your, you can do that.
And then follow up with inviting any questions.
Right.
Okay.
And if they can't make it, we understand, I mean, not always could they make it. But if they could make it, we did very
And if
much
they
appreciate
can't,
it.
because we will be on Zoom, they can do the same thing.
Right. They could do the same thing.
And in the
on
case
Zoom.
of them running over their 2 or 3 minutes, we can cut off their Zoom feed.
It's like the other stuff that I talked about, though, that if they're here in person, there can be some discussion before the meeting, during the break of the meeting, or after the meeting. That helps.
Sounds good.
All right.
Okay.
Continue.
Continuing with the draft agenda for the June 16 meeting. As always, are there any chairs of our standing committees who want to give an oral report to the full county board at the meeting?
Question,
Yes.
you and I, and David, do you think that we should do a discussion or anything in terms of what we're proposing for the employees as far as our on-site clinic, or do we want to wait until we get?
I think we want to wait a little bit later in the budget process on
Till
that.
we have that nailed down for sure, I would suggest.
Because while we think it's going to happen, we could end up sowing a lot of confusion.
I know it's important, but I.
Yes, it is.
It is.
Everything.
Okay.
Everything.
Is there anybody else, any other committee chair who wants to? If not, we will drop that from the agenda. And then we have the resolutions and reports and ordinances coming from the standing committee, which ones we will, of course, the ones coming from executive, we'll talk about later in this meeting. And the others from judiciary and law, from Health and Human Services Board, and from the Planning, Resource and Development Committee, the chairs will talk about when they do their reports. So the last thing we will highlight is that the next meeting in July is on the last Wednesday of the month, not the 3rd. It'll be July 28th. This executive committee, we are also recommending, will meet 1 week later than usual. So the 21st of July, to allow any additional business that comes in.
Do we get the budget in July?
We do. At the end of the July, it's handed out at the July County Board meeting. And here to present the microphone award is Dan Dunbar.
Thank you very much. Great honor, and I accept it. I just have a few, no.
Some people you'd like to thank?
Mr. Miller, you did indicate that July meeting is going to be live, right?
Yes.
Yes.
The June meeting is also going to be live.
Really? I must have missed that.
The June meeting will be actually.
Oh, I do have
what
that.
said.
All of them. That's the intent going forward. Okay, so that's the agenda, unless there's anything else that any members think we should add to that agenda. And as far as my report, we've already covered my item B, which is American Recovery Plan Act.
Thank you. Okay, items replaced at the request of the chairperson. That's a funding request from Dunn County Economic Development Corporation. I think that's changed a little bit, but do you want to start?
Yeah, I will.
All right.
Thank you. Thanks, Chairman Bartlett, for putting this on there. What we're asking and included in the packet there should be self-explanatory. What we're asking for is a commitment of the board to give us enough money to finish out the year. Bob Bazzani's worked very hard on putting together a presentation for us. And it actually surprised me in that we didn't need as much as I thought we needed. So if anybody has any questions, or I'll let Bob talk about it. Not on the phone though, Bob.
Another project, Harry.
Yeah. Okay. So has everybody had a chance to read? Okay, and Bob, go ahead.
All
If
right.
you have any questions, Bob put this together. We'll be able to answer your
Is
questions.
this on now?
Yes.
Okay, got it. Well, listen, I'm going to take a lot of time. I think we all saw the letter. And you're right, Gary. I mean, what happened was that when we first started looking at it, in terms of how much funding we would need, we hadn't gone through, and candidly, I hadn't gone through and made all those cost-cutting measures that we made, and hadn't gone through another fundraising. effort, but we folded all that in. And once we did that, and along with the potential sale of some of those assets, I'll be honest with you, I think we'd have enough funds to last us through the end of the year, okay? And I want a few $1,000s in that kitty just in case the DC EDC ends at the end of the year, because there's probably some expenses that would result as a result of dissolving the company. But nonetheless, that assumes that we don't get any additional expenses. Now, as it turns out, the very day that I sent that that letter out, I get an invoice from Momentum West for our membership there for $1,500 I hadn't counted on. Okay, so I mean, that type of stuff comes to me and I don't know about all of it. But nonetheless, the bottom line was, and I don't even pretend to know what the dynamics of this are, guys. I don't know how this would work, if it's even possible. But if somehow there was some consideration that we could have a $5,000 contingency fund, the monies that we don't need now, and I don't expect we would need, but that if in fact we needed it to get us through the end of the year, if there was some potential consideration from the county in that regard, and however that's done, great. If we can do that, fine. Okay. I would like to think at the very least that we'll have enough funds to finish this year. Okay. And I'm compelled to say this too, by the way, and that is that that without the county's support next year, Dunn County Economic Development goes away. I mean, it's just that simple. So there's no sense beating around the bush in that regard. Without the county's support, it disappears. But irrespective of that, then, and then I'm just going to give you a real quick update on some of the projects we're working on. And I'll tell you this, and I told this to the DC EDC board when I came on, was that if they're looking for an administrator, they got the wrong guy. I'm not that guy. Okay. I am not the type of guy that's going to sit there and try to get involved in all sorts of different initiatives that I don't feel result in brick and mortar and the creation of jobs. So my focus has been really on two things. The primary one is on those projects of finding and working with those projects that result in brick and mortar and the creation of jobs. And then I've done some work with broadband. I'll talk about that real quick. But we've got a lot of projects out at the Boyceville hardware store. We've run into some problems here with some of these projects. The wild escalation in the construction costs have pushed some of them back. As an example, when I worked, and I've done a lot of work with these projects, a lot more than a lot of other people would probably do. But with the hardware store, I put the full set of pro formas together. I've put the financing package together for this guy. We're looking at folding in the SBA 504, 7A loans, regional business fund loans. I've worked with the commercial lending industry in terms of getting this done. I've worked with contractors on his behalf. When I first did it and I put it together, we hadn't been in this escalation mode. So as an example, I had capitalized this with a pre-engineered steel building. And that was before pre-engineered steel went through the roof. You know, so here's what's happened. Anyway, and this and a few other projects that are on the table, they're being pushed back until this market stabilizes. Because it makes no sense for Mark, in this case with the Boyceville, a hardware store, to spend 35 or 50% more in construction costs today than he would 6 months from now. Okay, so we're slowing it down. It's still going to happen. I'm confident that we're going to have that hardware store up in Boyceville. It makes sense to do it. It makes financial sense. But anyway, the Menominee Golf Course did a ton of work with the city on that, and I mean a ton of work. Okay, and I think I don't know where that's at. I've done as much work as I'm going to do until somebody gives me a compelling interest to do more. Okay, the ball's in somebody else's court right now. The server farm, I was involved in that. That's a huge project. The city of Menominee. This was a server farm is a type of industry that needs a whole lot of power. In this case, they wanted 35 megawatts available to them in 10 years. That would require the construction of a new substation to get that done. Anyway, that package was put together primarily through the people who work with the city. Okay, I brought it to the table, provided some information, but I'm not the one who sent the package out. The city sent the package out. That's been put on hold for a while. I think it's still alive. Okay, but Menominee and working with XL Energy put a really solid, good package together for that project, and that would be a heck of a project. There's a couple of manufacturing projects. One of them is, I think it's for the manufacture of CBD oil. That was supposed to start here in June. I haven't caught up with the principal in the last month or two, but I'm going to be catching up with them to see where that's at. There's also another project. Actually, this would have to come out of NAP and go someplace much bigger. But this is someone who's developed a replacement for materials in the construction industry. If in fact what he shows me is even half true, it's a huge project. I mean, a huge project. And I will work with them and I will do all the work that's necessary to get that done on the premise they put it in Dunn County. And I've got several other projects I'll tell you about real quick that I'm working on in that regard. But anyway, that's out there. That's a longer term project. But if in fact we can bring that to fruition, that's a huge project. The community center, working with some people who are involved in this business, and they're looking to buy a primarily vacant property in the city of Menominee and convert it into a health center and a sports center, I guess, which call it. I've done a lot of work on that. I put their full set of pro formas together for them, laid out all their income streams, their cost elements, their capital plan, et cetera. And the last, I sat down with the week before last, went through it all. And I told the guys, I said, it's still a little tight. I said, functionally, and it works, but it's still too tight. Okay. And we need to do some different things. So I gave them some things that they have to do, and they've got to come back to me now. Okay. So that we can make that work. If they can do those things I asked them, it's probably true we can get this done. There was a food wagon out there. I worked with these guys, found them a kitchen, et cetera, and they just didn't want to move forward. I'll just skip over some of this stuff. I'm working with some of these last couple of things here. A medical device company, and these people approached me. And if in fact, and this unit, it's a portable, I'll just call it a portable. I'm under some strict non-disclosures on some of these guys because I'm playing with some really big hitters. They approached me on this and asked me if I could work with them to put this together. I did, and I've done a lot of work for them on this one condition. And I've got no guarantees here, guys, but on this one condition, that if we can get this done, okay, they will at least look at Dunn County. Okay, we'll put it on the table. And to be honest with you, this is a tech park project, and I've got that information to them. I've got their commitment that they will explore it. Now I'm working with these guys. These guys could build this on Mars if they want. Okay, I mean they're capable of doing that. But and all I've got is their commitment that they will at least look at us. So I don't have any guarantees with this one exception. We're guaranteed not to have that project unless we do the work. Okay, and so at least that's out there. I've got working with a guy on a hydroponic farm expansion here in rural Dunn County. These are modular hydroponic units. In fact, I'm meeting with them again tomorrow. And we're talking about how we can put this together. These are really neat units. And I got to tell you, we got to do some work to get this funded. Okay, it's going to take some effort, but I think we can do it. It's not a huge project, but nonetheless, it's something that I think could grow out there. And I've got a couple of software companies with whom I'm working. And as late as today, I've been on the phone a number of times with both principals and the funders on this. And I put all this together. Again, really neat projects. One of them has developed what's called SaaS, SaaS, software as a service. And they've developed a whole line of these, and most of these are involved with security. But it's like Zoom is a software as a service, or Netflix, that type of thing. And they provide this, they developed a product. And I got word from the funder this morning and that, geez, I'll tell you what, he's really interested, would like to get this done, pretty sure, but they'd like to make one other change. Can I do this for him? So I'm working on that. I'm getting that done. So I've got that. I've got another software company that also approached me, and I'm working on that as well. I think that's a pretty good chance to get that one done. It's a little longer term, okay? But nonetheless, those are on the table. The other thing we're doing real quick, and I've got some others. I'm working with I've worked with some businesses here in the last few weeks in terms of securing or at least applying for these SBA grant, $5,000 state grant programs. Okay, so I've had several businesses contact me and I've worked with them on how to get the application together and to get it in, to give them the best opportunity to maybe get those grants. Okay, and I've got another one. There's a e-commerce company here in Dunn County. He just started a few years ago. He's been working out of his basement. He needs now to expand, and he's selling a variety of products. He approached me, so I'm looking for space for him. And right now we're looking because geographically it works best for him if it's in the Elk Mound area, Elk Mound Colfax area. So we're looking for possible space, and so I'm working. But I'll help him put that project together. Okay. And so we got that out there. And the other thing is we've been meeting with the providers for with Mosaic, specifically in 24/7 telecom on broadband expansion. They've got an opportunity to secure other grants, and they've done a really good job of securing these grants. They really have. So these guys know what they're doing. But they've got and these are ARPA funds as well, but it's Wisconsin Public Service Commission's grant program. And I think it's a $100 million grant program, 188 million, I forget what the hell it is. But anyway, they've got to apply for these. They're looking, and we've met both, and I've met with both of these guys a number of times. And they've showed me the plans where in fact that they would plan to install fiber optic cable Mosaic in the northern part of the county and hit a lot of townships, and 24/7 telecom in the southern and central part of the county and it hit a lot of townships. They're going to want to apply for the grants to install fiber optic cable. I've gone through that, some of that grant criteria, which includes such things as minimal upload and download speeds. The Mosaic and 24/7 telecom would far exceed it. And I don't remember now with 24/7, Mosaic indicated that they would have 250 megs up and down in their fiber system. That's a big deal. Okay, that you can't get better service than that. All right, and fiber optic cable is a Cadillac of all services when it comes to broadband expansion. So anyway, they've got that out there, but the number one criteria for that grant is public participation. Okay, it's the number one. And if in fact there isn't any, and I talked to both companies, the chances of them securing the grant are pretty low. Okay, but if they can get some public participation in those grants, then in fact I think the opportunity for secure these grants is very high, and we could look over the course of the next year or two of getting substantial additional broadband expansion into rural Dunn County. Okay. They are currently meeting with the townships and the townships, and you guys will know this better than me, and Paul, you know it better than me. They've had some allocation of the ARPA funds, et cetera, and they're looking to see if in fact they can't get the townships to participate with them and get some commitments for this so they can put that in there. I expect they'll be pursuing some some matching commitment from the county. Okay, and the presumption is it would come out of the ARPA funds to which you referred to. Okay. I don't know the dynamics of how, in fact, you guys have to handle all that. I don't pretend to know that. I just know this, that there's a deadline on this grant application on July 27th. It has to be in or they don't have a chance. Okay, which means then that they'll have to, in order to get everything in, they'd probably have to have some sort of commitment from the county and or the townships before the end of June. And all I can say is that this is an expense that's going to last for generations. Okay, and it's a potential partnership that you can do with these providers that will provide substantial broadband expansion to the county. All I can say from my viewpoint is that if there's any way that you can see your way to doing that and working with these guys, I think that would be great. And I think it would really be important to rural Dunn County. So anyway, that's all I got. Anybody got any questions? Fine. I'm sorry it took so long, guys. Okay.
Any questions? Supervisor Morehouse.
I don't know either one of you. Have you approached the city?
Yes.
With the same request for contingency funding for the end of the year?
Yeah, and I did. I actually met with the mayor. All right, and this was a little while ago, but I met with him and I sat down with him and Lowell, the city manager. Okay, and I said, hey guys, if in fact we need funds, okay. Now I didn't specifically come out and ask for an amount, okay, but I said, if in fact we need funds to the end of the year, are you guys telling me? Will you guys tell me that potentially it's available from the city? And they both told me yes. Okay, I haven't asked them for anything specific, to be honest with you. Okay, haven't done that.
Any other questions? If not, as I've said before, we would wait until you see if you do need any extra money towards the end of the year, and then we would do a contingency. If we decided to participate in, helping out BDC to the end of the year, then we would do a contingency request and bring that from probably the committee of administration. Yeah.
And the good Lord willing, the creek don't rise, we won't need it.
Right.
Okay.
And we don't bring money out of contingency just in case we need it, I guess is what I'm saying. And that's where we're at this point. Earlier when we first put this on the agenda, you thought you were gonna need about 28,000, and I think it's great that you were to be able to cut some corners and receive some funds from other municipalities and other, businesses to get you to the end of the year, or at least where you think you're gonna go. But this may come back to us, or at least to admin as a contingency if they do need money. And I think if that was the case, we'd probably ask you to go to the city too, to see if we could both chip in, for what you need. Supervisor Steen, you needed.
Yeah, I just,
something to add?
I guess my question is, why couldn't we take a vote today saying that we would okay this?
Well, we don't know what we're okay.
Well, you could, why couldn't we take a vote today saying we'd okay up to $5,000 if needed? That way the EDC would know whether they're gonna have it or not, rather than having to come to the board again without knowing where they're at. You follow what I'm saying?
I do follow what you're saying. It's a little bit out of the regular process of contingency funds that it usually comes through admin. I'm gonna have to look to my left here if this would be proper. I didn't expect to do this
Well,
at this time.
the procedure that we have for a contingency fund request is a formal request is made, and it's the Committee on Administration that considers the request and makes the decision. The Executive Committee could certainly recommend that the Committee on Administration consider and grant such a contingency fund request. But another thing to bear in mind is we have set up a procedure where we highlight that contingency fund is intended for emergencies, something that has to be addressed right now, or there's going to be something we don't want to see happen, or time-sensitive opportunities. If we don't move now, we lose an opportunity. And I'm not sure that this qualifies as either. It also, if we go ahead and say we're authorizing up to $5,000 to be set aside, what incentive there, and that's all that's needed, what incentive is there for the EDC to go to the city? They're covered by the county. I think the wiser, and my recommendation for this committee would be, let's wait till we get nearer to the end of the year, see how the EDC's funds are working out. This may not be necessary at all. We have hit contingency fund twice already so far this year for emergency personnel issues. We don't know that another one isn't forthcoming. The more that we can hold on to, the better. And it would just seem prudent to wait until we have an actual emergency to address.
And I would acknowledge it's not an emergency.
Well, we'll go to the city. That's not a problem. And they indicated to me that if the county would participate, they'd participate. So
That's
we'll do
true.
that.
That's true.
So I'll take them at their word. All I'm saying is that if this committee would want to recommend to the administrative committee that they do this, I would rather, are you willing to do it or are you not? Because you might as well decide now if you're going to say no later on. I'm just asking to know where we're at, basically. And I don't think that's unreasonable. If the overwhelming consensus that they think it's okay, then maybe we could have a thumbs up on proceeding. If the consensus is you don't want to do it, well, then you don't want to do it. But I'd rather know now than then, if you come in case we need it. Luckily, and I think that Bob has done the yeoman's work on this. I thought we needed 28 grand. That's what I talked to David about. But Bob went to work. We sent out our letter to all our supporters. We started getting money in more than we thought we were going to get. Pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
So he was able, and I just feel this is a goodwill effort on our part to try to do what we can do to save ourselves. And all I'm asking is some sort of certainty from the board to get us, if we need it, to get us to the end of the year. Now we'll be coming to the county board for a request for next year. Now that's a different kettle of fish, but it's basically the same thing. I'm rather blunt. If you're not gonna support it, fine. If you're gonna support it, fine. I just soon know now.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, certain members of the executive committee may be more inclined to do it later when you need it than they are to do it now when it's not known if you need it. So if by waiting, you actually maximize the opportunities, the possibilities that this committee and ultimately the Committee on Administration approve a contingency fund request. If it's asked right now, I could foresee some members of those committees going, we haven't really expressed an emergency, so no, we don't think it meets the criteria for approving it. If it becomes a true emergency, hey, it's October, we can now forecast to the end of the year, we will not have enough funds, we need this. Then in October, the Committee on Administration, especially because it meets at the end of the month, would be in a position to say, okay, they've got an actual emergency on their hands, how do we feel about a contingency fund request?
I hear what you're saying. I sort of agree with you. You're splitting hairs.
I'm trying to
You're on
help.
or you're off. You know,
I don't know where to go with it. Supervisor McCullough, you got something to add?
Yeah, I don't know that I'm on or I'm off. I mean, that's not the case right now. If it goes through the regular order and it's needed, I am much more likely to vote yes than I am at the moment.
well, and I'll take the blame. I wasn't sure how to approach this whole thing. You know, and so I'm only interested in economic development, doing a good job for Dunn County. So if I've been jumping the gun here, and I am rather blunt, I understand that. But I'm fine with that if I have people of goodwill that are willing to look at it in that vein. Now, do you think that this committee could send a recommendation for the administration committee to look at this? Would that be the proper thing to do?
We could do a thumbs up that if we would be in favor of having the Committee on Administration put it on their agenda if the need so arises that they would need money, yes. I wouldn't think that would be a problem. Supervisor Morehouse.
When this whole issue came up, the EDC promised us that they, and you know, these reports about your lots and lots of outputs, lots of meetings and so on. But the promise was that we would see results in this year, which would then facilitate our decision about re-entering or refunding. I'm not convinced at this point that I'm sort of with Kelly. I don't know if I'm going to give you a thumbs up or a thumbs down. You know, if some of this works and we start to see some results in the county, I would be much more willing to take an extra step. I'm not sure I'm there.
Let me separate the issues. This issue is just what we're just asking to get to the end of the year. Okay. We've done some restructuring and we just want to get to the end of the year. That's what we're asking here. We'll be coming to the board for next year with a budget request. And I understand what you're saying. But I can, whether the board decides to support economic development or not, which I think it would be a mistake long-term if they didn't. But I can guarantee you that if we don't have somebody talking to somebody, it ain't gonna happen. That's all I can say. Some of these things happen quickly, but most of them take time. And we know why we were in the hole we're in. There's no sense revisiting that or beating a dead horse. But does that make sense to you that we're just asking for this? Maybe if we need it. The next year is a different kettle of fish. That's a different request. And I guess I would put it that way, if it makes sense.
Supervisor Quinn.
So I totally support if the need is there, of providing enough funds to get through the year, no matter what. But I do think that one of the frustrating things about this year, and it's not anyone's fault. Some of it's not anyone's fault because a lot of it came out as a result of really unfortunate medical situations and personal situations that no one could control. But we've dealt with economic development kind of on an ad hoc basis ever since the budget process began in the middle of the year. We didn't get a budget from, I understand why we didn't. It just seemed like there was always sort of the process that we need to go through to make good decisions got sidetracked over and over again. Now, I really think it would be in best interest of economic development if we get back to regular order, and the regular order that we've decided upon for contingency fund is when you need the money, make the argument. I know I'll support it. And I think most people here would support it much more likely but I think it'd be best if it just came through regular process and we started doing business like we should.
Supervisor Mays.
I would agree with what Supervisor Quinn is saying, and I understand where you're coming from, Gary, I really do. But getting back to the process, the procedure, the protocol is, let's wait until we get to that point and then move forward at that time, because at this, I would vote no today. When the time comes, it sounds like they got a lot of things going, then yeah. But for today, I would vote no. So let's, I understand where you're coming from. I know, I hear you. And you're making sense, you're not, you're.
Well, then, I appreciate if I may.
Anybody else first? Go ahead.
I appreciate what I'm hearing here, and I sense a degree of support that if we follow regular order, I guess is what you could say, and then we'll bring it up. And I have no problem with that. Sometimes I'm like a bull in a china shop. I understand that.
No.
I've never noticed that.
Ever so. And the last thing I want to do is pee anybody off. I don't want to do that. But I am kind of straightforward. But I thank you for listening, and thank you for considering it. And if that's the way we're going to go, we'll come back if we need it. Now, maybe we won't need it, which would be excellent.
I think it's a good report to let everybody know what's happening for the future. If you do, end up coming back to admin, you've educated some people already that aren't on the admin committee. And you've also educated people on when your budget ask is for next year's budget. So I think it was a good report. When we put it, well, I was just going to add, when we put this together, we thought they're going to need 28,000 to finish the year. They were going to be out in July, and thank goodness other people in Dunn County stepped up to the plate and kept the doors open. Bob.
Just one final thing, and I would just ask that if you guys, either individually or if you know of anybody who has anything on the table relative, I don't care whether it's business startups, expansions, whatever it is, or relative to that type of thing, and they need some help putting it together, have them give me a call. Just have them call me. Sit down and see if we can work out. And I'll be straight up with you guys. I don't think I have to tell you this, but a lot of the people who come to me, and I've had a lot of them come to me with these concepts and the ideas, and I never try to take the position that it's a waste of time. But in a lot of cases, I know full well that it's not going to happen for a whole variety of reasons. Most of them that come to me are that way. Okay. And the only ones that I want to spend a lot of time on are the ones that in fact have some legs and that have some promise. But I sure want all of them to come to me. We'll see.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
See no other questions or anything. We'll move on to number 7, consideration of reports, resolutions, and ordinances to the county board from the executive committee. 7A is a resolution approving of FY 2021 budget adjustments for CJCC, Human Services, and Public Health. Can I have a motion to that effect? Supervisor Tripp moves, Supervisor Morehouse seconds. Discussion or speaking to this resolution, Mr. Stride.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This budget resolution or budget resolution, like historically, we try to combine many as possible. So this combination of 3 requests from Department of Human Services, Public Health, and Administration Department, Criminal Justice Collaboration. And they pertain mainly to new grants or awards that have come in. The details are in the resolution, so I won't restate that. However, the adoption of the resolution does increase the 2021 adopted budget by $142,006, but has no impact on the current tax levy. So these have been reviewed by the appropriate standing committees and were recommended for consideration.
Any questions? Not, all in favor of moving this county board, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. 7B, a resolution approving FY 21 budget adjustment for a one-time payment for NDC and public health employees. Need a motion for this. Supervisor Headland moves, Supervisor Steen seconds. Speaking to this, Mr.
I can do that.
Mr. Miller.
Just because we've actually done, last month, the county board passed the resolution authorizing the use of the provider relief funds for this purpose. This is for bonus payments to staff of the neighbors and the public health to compensate for the extreme workload that they shouldered throughout basically the pandemic year last year. We presented the schedule of payments with the resolution that was adopted by the county board in June. This is the necessary budget adjustment to authorize the actual receipt of the revenues and expenditures for those purposes. So this is more or less a process step that we need to take, but we do need to take it and enact it this month because we need to distribute these funds before the end of the month. Did I capture everything, Mr. Stray? Yes, sir. Thank you.
Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. 7C.
Mr. Chair,
Oh, Supervisor Tripp, I'm sorry.
do the people affected by this know about it? I mean, the people getting the bonuses, have they heard? I mean, are we getting any feedback, reaction?
I have not heard any feedback reaction. I believe they do know about it.
I would be surprised if they did.
This has been public,
Yeah.
but I've not heard anything.
Mr. Johnson,
Brian
have you
Johnson?
heard anything from your committee or your director?
I have not. I can't honestly tell you if they know it or not, but I would guess they would. That's just a
I would
guess.
think they would have said something
Yeah.
because we talked a lot about it at the committee for retention of employees, so I would.
Yeah, they've been struggling with
I'm
that. So
sure they would have mentioned it.
I will follow up with,
Or it wouldn't do any good.
I think
Right.
I'm almost certain that they know. I mean, they're not going to know, but I just wondered about reaction. If there's no reaction, then I would suggest we add the supervisors' names to this list as well.
Definitely.
I mean, I worked really hard during the pandemic.
yeah, but what did you provide is the question.
Well, aid and comfort. Oh, God.
All right.
I would be interested in
Yeah.
hearing.
I will follow up with
Yeah.
KT Gallagher and Carmen Flunker.
Did we vote on this?
We did.
Okay.
Did you get distracted?
Yeah, I did.
Sorry.
Moving on to 7C, resolution authorizing the borrowing of not to exceed $6,850,000 and providing for the issuance and sale of general obligation promissory notes therefore. I need a motion for this. Supervisor McCullough moves. Supervisor Headland seconds. Speaking of this, Mr. Stry.
Yes, Mr. Miller wants.
No, this one's yours. The feel-good
You
ones
do the-
I
you the
do.
bonus one.
The ones that hurt, you get to do.
Oh, thank you. If you recall, last month I brought to you a plan of financing for the borrowing for this year that was included in the budget, as well as free financing opportunities that came from our municipal advisor, and you endorsed that plan. So this is the follow through on it. This is the first step in the process. This authorizes the borrowing and it sets the limit, the not to exceed limit for the borrowing. And it's the first legal step. Just to remind everybody, the new money portion of this is just under $1.35 million from the approved budget for 2021. And is also refinancing the 2013A notes as well as a 2018 loan that we took out. It was a small loan, but it's at 4% interest. We can get more than half of that, a cut. The approximate savings, net present value for both equates to over $300,000 as it's estimated right now. So it's worth our time and effort. And that's the net of all the costs and everything as projected. So again, this is the first step in the process. Passing this resolution by the county board next week kicks the ball in motion as far as going through the whole long process to get this done. So that's why it's before you today for consideration.
And the only thing I want to emphasize what Mr. Stray said, in the 2021 budget, the new money is only, but it's 1.3 million. This says 6.8, but a lot of that, the bulk of that is the refinancing of existing debt.
And the additional 1.35 was going to capital projects?
Yes.
Correct.
You sent out some additional stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's, yes, thank you. Yeah, I didn't receive that till after the agenda went out from the municipal advice. We had the resolution, but not all the supplement.
And what do you expect the interest rate to be on the bonds that we would send out?
Looking at the projections here.
Is that what these first few
They've
pages
got,
are? That I didn't quite
Yeah,
understand.
roughly anywhere from right around 1%, could be give or take. You know, they're proposing 9 or 10-year notes. Again, a lot of this is driven by market. These are all, you know, if the market goes crazy here in the next few weeks, and we still have the opportunity to change. If something goes crazy in the market, we can always put the brakes on until you actually approve the sale in about a month. But this starts the process, but their projections are right around that 1% range,
And
which
it
is consistent.
It looks like the majority of that 13 one was what, at 3%?
Page 4. I know 2018 was at 4%. I issued that. 2013A, yeah, they were in the range of 2.5% to 3.25%, depending on how long they were left to be paid out. So.
Anybody else have any other questions? Those are some I thought of. Supervisor Steen.
Not specific to this, but do you, every year, do you look at things to see if we can save money by refinancing, or is it every year or every 3 years, or how do you do it?
No, absolutely. This is part of the debt management tasks, at least once a year, if not twice a year. Historically, in my career, it's twice a year. At the time that you get over the end of the year, you just finish your budget, and then in January, February, I end up meeting with the municipal advisor. Then a lot of times I'd have a follow-up conversation during the budget process. That was with a city with a lot more of a debt portfolio to manage. Here, we've got a limited portfolio, big dollars, but a limited portfolio as far as the number of debt issues. But yes, we have those conversations, especially watching the market. What was it, a year and a half ago or a year ago, whenever COVID hit, if you recall, the market went crazy on us. We were in the middle of refinancing that. We put the brakes on it because it got unstable and the savings weren't there. And it went from a savings of projected at $750,000. Our end result was over 1.3 million in savings. So you know, there is somewhat of an art to this, but yeah, that is part of an ongoing effort, and that would be my recommendation. And I'm sure that's the standard practice of most CFOs.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, all in favor say aye.
Right.
Opposed? Motion carried. 7B, resolution authorizing acceptance and expenditure of federal and state COVID-19 reimbursement funds. Need a motion for this? Supervisor Quinn moves, Supervisor Anderson seconds. Speaking to this, Want to explain it, Mr. Strife?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. This came up recently as, if you recall last year, in the early stages of COVID-19, we were getting alerts that there was going to be CARES Act funds and all these other funds that were going to be coming our way to manage. And some of these had very narrow windows of usage. Routes to recovery, for example, I mean, you had very few months to utilize it. We had to scramble, but to the county's benefit, we received over 2 million in total grant dollars. That's not conducive under the normal process for budget adjustment, things like that. So working with Corporation Counsel, we researched to see if we could do a blanket budget adjustment, which neither of us supported, or if we could do a resolution like this to indicate that specific to COVID dollars that come in from grants, that staff is given the authority to go ahead and receive those funds and utilize them consistent with those grants. It's no new levy, no new funds. These are receiving and using COVID dollars so that we could be responsive and not flood the agendas with all of these little pots of money that keep showing up. And what we experienced last year really did play out. It's beginning to play out again. Either things weren't fully utilized for CARES Act and they're being reassigned, reallocated. State of Wisconsin is doing supplemental allocations, a number of them to Health and Human Services area. All of a sudden this money is reallocated. But sometimes you only have till the end of September to use it. And in one case, it's an uncapped grant, meaning that as much as we have need, we can utilize. Well, then you try to put in anywhere from 30 to 60-day process that we have for a budget process. If they just came out now, they may not have full approval until the end of July. Well, that's a lost opportunity for the county. So consistent with what was approved last year, talking with Chris Corpola and thinking through some of these other pots of money that keep showing up, some in small dollars, some in larger dollars, I recommended bringing forward again the similar resolution that Corporation Council was comfortable bringing forward last year and the county board accepted, to give us that ability to go ahead and receive those dollars, use them only specific to COVID-19 supplemental allocations, and then we true it up at the end of the year. Now, what we did in practice last year was, frankly, just to keep on top of it. As many of these came in, we still tried to get as much of them through before we got to the end of the year, because you recall at the end of the year and then the carry forward resolutions, those are huge to begin with. But this at least puts staff in a position, and county manager and myself, to be able to go ahead and receive these dollars and the departments to be able to use them without having to wait that extended period and possibly lose some opportunities. So that's why this is before you for your consideration. I'm also going to point out this may be something that we consider after the first year. These have to be in the fiscal year or calendar year, that you consider possibly doing it again in 2022 and 23. And the reason I lay that foundation here is we may have the same situation as grants with ARPA dollars and things like that. Just want to plant that seed that may come up again. We can't act on that right now, but these are unique times in government finance where there's a lot of money moving around, and it's a massive headache to try to keep on top of it, but it's also opportunities for the county we don't want to lose.
And if I may, Mr. Chair, not to belabor the point, like last year, this allows us, staff, take the money, spend the money. At the end of the year, pull it all together, show it to the county board for the formal budget adjustment. That's what it does for us. I think we've had a COVID-related budget adjustment in most of the months so far this year already, and in some cases more than one. So it's going to save us all time and effort if we do this.
Any questions? Not all in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Moving on to 8, review of reports, resolutions, and ordinance coming to the county board from the standing committees. 8A from the Planning Resource and Development Committee, an ordinance creating Chapter 10 of the County Code of Ordinances regarding manure management. And this is going to be the first reading this month. Would you like to speak on that, Supervisor Quinn? Or
Boy,
we
you know,
have
who
Mr.
can,
Cummings in the back,
yeah,
still here? Yeah, he is.
I'll let Chase say something
Okay.
about it.
Go ahead, Chase. Thank you for
It's hard to
staying
get
with
us to stop talking once we get going on this.
You're always talking the S blank, right?
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, so this ordinance is an update, or I should say a repeal and replace of our existing manure management ordinance that was adopted in the year 2000. This has gone through beyond my time here, which is pretty limited, over a couple of years. Recommendations coming out of Livestock Operations Study Group, some of the other ad hoc groups regarding the context of this ordinance. What this ordinance basically is going to do is incorporate ag performance standards and prohibitions that are already part of the state administrative code and put those into ordinance here in Dunn County. This has gone through much deliberation for many PRD and Land Conservation Committee meetings. Received a public hearing in December of 2020 and received a second public hearing in May 11th of this year. There has been not much public comment in the recent public hearing. Prior to that, there was several public comments and we've incorporated those when necessary and appropriate as part of the ordinance. So with that, I can answer more details of the ordinance if you'd like, or answer any questions.
Anybody have any questions of Chase?
Mr. Chairman, just a comment.
Supervisor Anderson.
Thank you. I'm fairly new on this committee, but the work that's been done and those three of us has been tremendous. And I have come to a new appreciation. I thought I knew something about it, but after seeing all the work you've done, I just say hats off, great job. We need to support this.
Any other questions? Comments? Supervisor Headland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, the closing of existing, I guess, storage facilities, storage pits, tanks. Does that include all types of storage, above ground tanks such as storage stores and so forth? And I guess I just thought of a couple of those in the county that I know of. I know one just got dug out with a backhoe. I guess, how are we going about finding out about those? I guess that was my question. And I don't know if you have an answer to that yet, but
Sure, certainly.
do we have a list of those facilities?
So the current ordinance that we're operating under was adopted in the year 2000. And there are, since that time, we have record of whichever facilities have been permitted since then. But there is a slew of structures and pits in the county that predated that ordinance. And we usually come across those either maybe the landowner calls and says, we would like to close this pit, and we are aware of them that way, or through drive-bys, you can see them from the road, that sort of thing. As time permits, we make contact with those landowners to pursue their options. Other times it's when we're out performing another sort of evaluation of the farm, particularly for Administrative Code NR 151, the Ag Performance Standards and Prohibitions, of which this new ordinance would incorporate. And we come across those as part of the criteria that we evaluate farms for is, do you have any existing manure storage structures, and are they being used? Are they abandoned and not formally abandoned? And then we pursue them that way. In many cases, under the Ag Performance Standards and Prohibitions, we have to offer cost share to abandon those. So that can be a limiting factor at times, as if we have enough cost share funds. So, but the intent, I guess, since my time here would be to develop a list, if you will, so we know where to kind of prioritize our workload regarding those things. And those are easy fixes, especially for a groundwater, surface water type contamination issue. So.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I see none. Moving on to A2. Ordinance approving a rezone in the town of Tanner.
So this is a pretty straightforward rezone. This is a parcel near Lake Tanner in a residential area. It's zoned ag, but the owner wants to rezone it residential so we can divide it into 2 lots. It fits the area. The lot should be adequate size. The town has reviewed the request and approved it, and the committee is recommending approval.
Any questions? All right, thank you. Moving on to 8B from Health and Human Services Board. Resolution authorizing a Dunn County housing study. Supervisor Norhouse.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Probably all of us recognize that housing in the county is a pretty significant issue. We know, and I don't know if we've spent enough time talking about the proportion of our citizens who really lack any kind of housing, and the work that Stepping Stones has done to try to temporarily house people, particularly during the COVID crisis, with enormous expenditures for hotel placements. And since we've looked at this a couple of times, you know that the Department of Human Services has applied for and received a CDBG grant, working in collaboration with WestCap and Stepping Stones, that will provide safe transitional housing for people. So low-income housing is a significant issue which we are aware of. We also know that workforce housing is an issue, that it has been difficult for employers to bring employees in when there isn't either available housing or affordable housing. The median price house, Chris Corpola tells us, is $167,000. And that's unaffordable for a lot of people. So housing is also an economic development kind of issue. So when the health department did its community needs assessment in 2018, did a survey of county residents identifying 5 issues on which work is currently being done. One of those issues was safe and affordable housing. And over 50% of the respondents said there is no such thing as safe and affordable housing. So Tom and I and Steve Rasmussen serve on the West Central Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission, and obviously knew that they had done several housing studies, extremely well done and well received in Barron and Polk County. So we presented that information to the housing action team that grew out of the community needs assessment, and the housing action team has voted to proceed with authorizing a housing study, and has applied for and received a grant from the Community Foundation of Dunn County in the amount of $10,000 to support the cost of a housing study. So several of us have been working with Regional Plan to talk about the dimensions of such a study. The budget for such a study for the county stands at $10,000. In other words, it is supported by the grant from the Community Foundation. Costs would increase as and if other municipalities in the county elect to come on board. Those costs will increase depending on the scope of the additional studies that the municipalities want. Regional Planning Commission has agreed, and has done so in the other 2 counties, to apply for CDBG funds that would support those extra additional costs up to 2/3 of the total. So we estimate that in the worst possible scenario, that $3,000 of county funds, administrative dollars from health and human services, would be allocated to the study. The committee unanimously endorsed this. This is something that we need, we think, very much in the county. It will help us explore what kind of policy options that this county board could consider and take on to make a difference in the situation. So I'm recommending approval.
Any questions?
Yes.
Supervisor Mays.
Yeah, I find it interesting, this study. These other counties have done it. We know there's a shortage. We know what the median value is here. So what, I mean, I guess that in my mind, what is the real, you say you're trying to find ideas that the county board could maybe support to help the housing. Other than, have these other counties come up with ideas? Or I mean, there has to be, because we all know it's an issue. So we're not the first one that's facing it. We know there's been studies done. And other than just the county actually building houses to make them safe and afford, yeah, I mean,
Right.
the bottom line is, how are you going to make affordable housing? You're going to have industry pay substantial wage increases so you can afford affordable housing, and the county doesn't have control over that. And that's another whole can of worms. So I'm not against the study, as long as in my mind I can actually visualize an outcome that would be actually beneficial that these other counties haven't already done and we could relate to, you know? So I guess, I mean, it's an open-ended question, and I don't know if no matter what answer you give me, I'll be satisfied.
Well,
I'll probably be wrong.
Supervisor Morehouse has
That's
a
a pretty good
for you.
answer.
She does.
Yeah.
Good. I anxiously await it.
Because I asked the same question.
So yes, there have been specific actions undertaken in collaboration in both Polk and Barron counties. What we did here was bring regional plan back to a group of a number of us, Chairman Bartlett included, to say, look, data are good, right? Pages and pages of data are helpful, but that's not what we want here. What we want is that you facilitate some collaboration with the business community and other municipalities and the county. And that we focus this study on actual steps that can be taken to address the situation. And obviously not, the county is not going to build houses, but in collaboration with employers and the university and our medical providers and so on, it is entirely possible that there are funds that can be accessed and policies that could be implemented to make a real difference. But we've asked them, and they've revised their study plans to make sure that this is focused.
And who are they?
They being regional planning.
Okay.
Sorry for not being specific.
Well, yeah, a lot of entities were mentioned, and so, because it's always, they say this and they say that, but
Yeah,
nobody
sorry.
ever says who they
Sorry.
are.
Sorry.
I mean, I've been told they say a lot of things about me. So,
They do.
They do.
They do, yeah.
Let's not get into
But
that.
but it's just clarification, I mean, it's just, good luck with your study.
Okay. Supervisor Headland.
Yeah, one thing that I think Jim, you and I had a part of a discussion on was that I believe that if we don't have, and I like the study, the way you're going to do it, an update study, we won't have anything to go and show why we deserve what may be available in funds in terms of maybe, some ARPA funds or CDBG funds, where they come through, or HUD funds, whoever it's going to supply. So I think that, again, that window is going to come up when they're going to say, okay, here's some funds you can use for that. And Dunn County, what's your plan? And so I think that, again, I agree, we don't want just a whole bunch of more numbers. We want a plan of how we can successfully apply these funds and make a difference.
And I think Supervisor Headland is correct. I think that we certainly don't know about those opportunities for securing additional funds. But at this time when additional funds are moving, it would be nice to have an action plan in place so that we could take advantage of them.
Okay. Any other questions? Supervisor McCullough?
Just to address the point again, my understanding is a lot of the, particularly the federal grants and some of the large private grants for housing want you to have very current and up-to-date data if you're applying for the grant. So without that data, there's a lot of funds that you simply aren't eligible to try and achieve.
Anybody else? All right, thank you. Moving down to 9, reports from the standing committees. Start over here in the corner, Mr. McCullough.
Pretty much routine operations. I am happy to say highway side is entirely routine operations. Transit is updating technology, and the electric bus project is moving along nicely. And that's it for me.
Thank you. Supervisor Tripp, judicial.
Thank you. Again, pretty much business as usual. We did forward a couple of contingency requests to the Committee on Administration. One was from the clerk of court's office, where they had an unexpected resignation. And in a small workforce like that, you really can't budget that ahead of time. So we approved that request. The other was from the medical examiner's office. And you talk about an emergency. This was an emergency 3 years ago and we didn't deal with it. It was an emergency 2 years ago and we didn't deal with it. Finally, we're dealing with it. We've got a medical examiner and a chief deputy medical examiner who don't get any time off. They work 28, 29, 30 days a month. You don't retain good qualified employees that way. So other than those 2 contingency requests, that was pretty much it.
Thank you. Supervisor Quinn.
PR&D met last week. We had 2 major items in a pretty short meeting. As you recall, at the last board meeting, we asked for the land division ordinance to be returned to the committee for further review and discussion. So that was a major topic. We had some folks from the towns that came and had some informal discussion with them, got their opinions. What we ended up doing was identifying some strategies that we might use to address that would amend the ordinance to address some of the concerns that the towns have, while still maintaining the fundamental purpose of it. And staff are going to be preparing some of those items in sort of a conceptual form for us to chew over at the next meeting. So we're making progress on that. And the other thing we talked about really was the workload issue in planning and zoning. And so we have one of ours, again, a small department that is overworked already and has a key personnel going on maternity leave for several months and a staff vacancy which can't be filled, which means that the burden is of zoning and sanitation are falling inevitably on Mr. Colson, the manager. So we talked about that and sort of agreed that we would we would support his sort of putting on aside, focusing on the services that need to be addressed for county residents, and then setting aside for the time being some of the projects that can be put off, maybe planning and new ordinance development projects. So that's what we're going to be doing and trying to stay ahead of the workload this summer and fall. That's about it.
Thank you. Supervisor Morehouse.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We met last on May 27th and welcomed a new citizen member to the Health and Human Services Board, Dr. Alexander Hall. She is a physician and a faculty member at Stout. She will be a great addition to the committee. And I did ask each of our each of our departments to do a kind of 1 or 2 minute sort of agency overview, a little difficult in our turf, but we are glad to have her on board. We had normal reports from each of the three departments. We probably spent a bit more time on explaining how the Department of Human Services voucher process works and what those vouchers support. We've been trying to do pretty good communication about how that process works, but obviously we still have questions on that. We approved the budget adjustments and the housing resolution, and that's about it. We meet the last Thursday of the month.
Thank you. Supervisor May of Facilities.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We had our last meeting on May 26th, and some of the topics discussed was we had a public comment asking why there wasn't more playground equipment at some of our parks, specifically out at Lambs Creek Park, which is across from Jake's out there. And as far as, so there was some discussion held on that, but we're waiting for a legal liability issue on that before we move forward anymore on that. The record storage moving is in process, is going on. The Accessible Wisconsin wheelchair is moving forward, so we should be getting that pretty soon. We did have, since the meeting, I had a phone call, well, actually an email from an individual that wanted to know about renting the racetrack for a rally cross auto racing. So I asked him to send me some more information as far as their insurance policy and references, and they haven't gotten back to me at all on that. So I'm waiting to hear from that. And we're also still looking at solar energy. It's kind of interesting. We need to know what the 15-minute demand intervals are. And Excel says they can't chart it yet. We're getting charged them. But so we're trying to get that worked out from Excel. And our next meeting is on June 23rd. That's my report.
Thank you. Supervisor Headland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Admin committee met last Thursday, May 27th. And as some aforementioned information from Mr. Tripp, we're approached with some contingency fund requests. We did approve those contingency fund requests. The cost of those requests were around $44,000 for finishing up the year from June through the end of the year for actually 80% of a new deputy coroner. And then there was a request again, which really was to pay the outgoing funds owed to the early retirement that again wasn't budgeted for, and that was just under $13,000. So those were approved. We also had a discussion and approval of proposal to go forward with changing some of our healthcare benefit to our employees here in the county. And part of that was possibility of setting up an on-site clinic type operation that would save us some money in some of the more basic requests for medical care and checkups and so forth that we do have here from county employees. We approved a remote work policy. It was an update now that we're getting more people back to work and have the ability to bring more people back to work. One of the questions that came up with that we came up with a solution for was what if somebody, kids slip, fall, knock the county computer off the kitchen table? Who's responsible? Well, if we've approved that employee to have that computer home and work from home, it's our computer. So that was, I think, a good answer to that. We're not going to bill the employee or the children for right. Okay, and our next meeting coming up will be June 24th at 3:30. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Anderson, CRT.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The CRT committee meets always the second Monday of the month, so we meet next Monday. So I do not have a report. You heard our report at our last meeting. So I'm telling you, on July 21st, you're going to hear 2 months report from the CRT. Just remind you. But I do want to mention one thing more. As chairman of the CRT committee, one responsibility I have is to get the librarians of Dunn County together. We didn't do that last year because of COVID. And I did talk a little bit with Chairman Bartlett about this. I think we will be doing that, and Supervisor Tripp, of course, always helps with that. We will be needing to meet with all the librarians, and hopefully it'll be at Colfax in July, because that's the next meeting place. And that's not CRT, but as chairman of that's my responsibility. So I just wanted to report that to you. That ends my report.
Okay, thank you. Well, if there's no other questions, the next thing on our
Hey,
agenda.
Mr. Chair,
Oh, you forgot about,
I got one too.
I was making a joke when you said we could ignore him.
I thought you meant that. Go ahead, Supervisor Johnson with.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Our last meeting for the neighbors was May 20th. Administrator Flunker provided updates from the Quality Assurance Committee. There were 4 new hires and 3 resignations. 314 hours were missed due to COVID. Administrator Flunker provided an update of the wage study status and the CNA training program. The census was 111 at the end of April, and as of the day of the meeting, it was 114. Arrowhead remains closed. Updates were given on efforts to fill the life enhancement position and culinary mentor opening. The life enhancement position has since been filled. There have been no COVID outbreaks as of the last meeting, and only unvaccinated staff were being tested twice weekly. Mask requirements remain in place. An adjustment for adding homemaker hours was also discussed. There was some real good news. The East neighborhood had its first survey in 2 years. The facility received 0 citations for health portion of the survey. A citation-free survey is uncommon and exciting at any time. So I would like to congratulate the staff and the neighbors for that. It's fantastic. The next meeting will be June 17th, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry I missed you. Anything else?
Mr. Chairman, could I make just a little announcement, or are we up to announcements now?
I guess you, go ahead.
I would urge everybody, if you get the Eau Claire Leader, in today's paper, it talks about Eau Claire County, what Eau Claire County is doing regarding the ARPA funds. And so people, I don't know about the other supervisors that they call you and ask you these things. We don't seem to get the publicity that Eau Claire County gets, obviously, because the paper records there. But I'd urge you to read this article, because what our county manager just said about ARPA funds and everything is spelled out very clearly what Eau Claire County is saying. I think they got 20 million, and but we've got half of our 8.8 million now, and it backs up, and like our CFO said, those funds must be spent by the end of 2024, or that's the deadline. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next on the agenda is that county manager annual evaluation. We probably go into closed session. Why don't we take a little break before we do that? Let people that aren't going to stay with us leave.
Okay, I'll stop the live stream and the recording.
Go into closed session.
Take a break first.
We can't. That's what I was thinking. Okay. I didn't know about IT if they had to stay here.
I think, Krista, we don't need to broadcast this. It is open.
Right.
So we don't need to broadcast. We can turn off the YouTube broadcast. You do not need to log
Right.
back on to turn back on the Zoom after they come out of closed session. I think what you do is you just come out of closed session. Any further announcements, including the next meeting date, and close it. I don't think we need to be recorded. So you'll be able to back out as well, Krista.
Okay,